There's something uniquely unsettling about premonitions in Hollywood. In a world built on illusion and carefully controlled chaos, where death-defying stunts and elaborate productions happen daily, the line between scripted danger and real catastrophe can become terrifyingly thin. During my years investigating unexplained phenomena, I've discovered that the entertainment industry harbors more dark secrets than any thriller could imagine. The glitz and glamour we see on screen masks a world where split-second decisions can mean the difference between life and death, where intuition, that inexplicable gut feeling, often becomes the only thing standing between performers and tragedy. Today I'm sharing two accounts that reveal how premonitions manifest in the high-stakes world of entertainment. Both cases involve seasoned professionals who trusted their instincts when logic told them otherwise. Both cases saved lives through what others dismissed as paranoia or superstition. The first comes from a veteran stuntman whose career-defining moment wasn't a spectacular feat, but his refusal to perform one. The second, from an Academy Award nominee whose acceptance speech was never delivered, because the ceremony never finished. These testimonies were given to me in confidence, recorded separately in quiet hotel rooms far from the spotlight. Both individuals still work in the industry, their identities protected here for obvious reasons. Both carry the weight of knowing that sometimes the most important performance is the one you refuse to give. Listen carefully to these accounts. In an industry where everyone's expendable and the show must go on at any cost, these individuals chose to trust something deeper than their contracts, something that saved not just their own lives, but countless others. Story 1. The stuntman who said no account of Danny Rodriguez, 43 years old, professional stuntman. I've been throwing myself off by buildings, crashing cars, and getting set on fire for 22 years. In this business, fear keeps you alive, but instinct keeps you breathing. What I'm about to tell you happened on the biggest movie set I'd ever worked on, and it nearly destroyed my career. But it also saved my life, and the lives of everyone in that warehouse. This was back in February during production of Velocity Rising. You've probably seen the trailers. Big budget action flick, $200 million production, the kind of movie that makes or breaks careers. I was hired as the lead stunt double for the main character, a job that should have set me up for life. The stunt in question was the climax sequence, a 40-foot fall from a collapsing oil rig set piece onto a series of carefully positioned crash pads. Nothing I hadn't done 100 times before. The rigging was state-of-the-art. The safety checks were thorough, and the stunt coordinator was one of the best in the business. But from the moment I walked onto that set, something felt wrong. I can't explain it properly. It was like that feeling you get when someone's watching you, except it was the equipment watching me. Every time I looked at the rigging system, the cables, the harnesses, the release mechanisms, my stomach would clench up like a fist. The night before the shoot, I had the dream. I was performing the stunt exactly as rehearsed. The countdown, the explosion effects, the cables releasing me at the perfect moment. But in the dream, as I'm falling, I hear this metallic snap, like a guitar string breaking but amplified. The sound echoes through the warehouse, and I realize I'm not slowing down. The safety cables have snapped, and I'm free-falling toward concrete instead of padding. I woke up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, with that metallic sound still ringing in my ears. The next morning, I arrived early and did my own inspection of the equipment. Everything looked perfect. The AIDA cables were rated for 3 times my weight. The release mechanism had been tested dozens of times. The harness was brand new, top-of-the-line stuff. Logically, there was no reason for concern. But that feeling in my gut was getting stronger. During the morning safety briefing, I found myself studying the faces of the rigging crew. These were guys I'd worked with for years, professionals who'd never cut corners. But I noticed something strange. None of them would make eye contact with, me. It was subtle, but in this business, you learn to read people's confidence levels. And these guys weren't confident. That's when I started asking questions. When's the last time these cables were stress tested? 3 weeks ago, the rigger replied. All good. What about the release mechanism? Any modifications since the last setup? Minor adjustments for timing, nothing major. But the way he said, minor adjustments, made my skin crawl. In stunt work, there's no such thing as Minor when you're dealing with gravity. I asked to see the stress test results. The paperwork was there, but something was off about the dates. The tests were done 3 weeks ago, but the cables had been re-rigged 2 days ago for a different angle. Nobody had retested them after the modification. That's when the metallic sound from my dreams started echoing in my head again. I pulled the stunt coordinator aside. I need to see those cables stress tested again before I go up there. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Danny, we've got 200 people on this set. We're burning $150,000 a day, and you want to delay for a redundant safety check. It's not redundant if it saves my life. The cables are fine. The rigging is fine. Everything is fine. But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't sure. Nobody was sure. They were all just hoping I was wrong because admitting I might be right would cost them the day. That's when I made the decision that should have ended my career. I'm not doing the stunt. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the air conditioning humming, the distant sound of traffic outside, somebody's radio crackling in the background. Everyone was staring at me like I'd just committed professional suicide. "What do you mean you're not doing it?" the director asked, walking over with that look directors get when their schedule is threatened. "I mean, I'm not jumping off that rig until someone shows me those cables. Can handle the load after the modifications." "Danny," the stunt coordinator said in that tone people use when they think you're having a breakdown. "We've been through this. The equipment is safe. Then prove it. We don't have time to make time." For 30 minutes, I stood my ground while lawyers were called, contracts were threatened, and my reputation was dragged through the mud. The entire crew was watching. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with the kind of contempt reserved for people who hold up the money train. Finally, the insurance representative made the call. Test the cables. They rigged up a 200-pound weight, my approximate mass with gear, and ran it through the same sequence I was supposed to perform. Everything looked perfect for the first 30 feet of fall. Then we heard it, that metallic snap from my dream. The primary cable snapped exactly where it had been re-rigged, and 200 pounds of dead weight slammed into the concrete floor, where I would have landed. The backup cable, designed to catch me if the primary failed, had also been compromised by the modification and snapped under the sudden load transfer. The warehouse went dead silent, except for the echo of metal hitting concrete. If I had performed that stunt, I would have died on impact. No question. The math was simple and brutal. The investigation revealed that the minor adjustment had created a stress concentration point in the cable that wasn't visible during normal inspection. It would only fail under the dynamic load of an actual fall. The rigging crew hadn't done anything wrong. The failure was a result of an engineering oversight that nobody could have predicted. Nobody except my subconscious, apparently. The production was delayed for 3 days while new rigging was installed and tested. I kept my job, barely. Some people called me a hero for preventing a tragedy. Others called me a liability for trusting feelings over facts. But here's what really haunts me. After we wrapped, I was talking to one of the camera operators. He mentioned that he'd had a weird feeling about that day, too. Said he'd been thinking about calling in sick for no reason he could explain. When I asked around, I found out at least 6 other crew members had experienced similar anxiety about that particular stunt. It was like the disaster was broadcasting a warning signal that only some of us could receive. I've done hundreds of stunts since then, and I've never had that feeling again. But I've also never ignored my instincts again. In this business, you learn to trust the equipment, trust the crew, and trust the process. But sometimes, you have to trust something deeper than that. Sometimes, you have to trust the part of your brain that knows things it shouldn't know. Have you ever had a moment where every logical part of your mind said one thing, but something deeper told you to stop? Have you ever trusted a feeling that saved your life, even when you couldn't explain why? Danny's story reveals how premonitions can manifest in high-pressure environments where lives depend on split-second decisions. But what happens when that same intuitive warning system activates during an event watched by millions? What happens when the danger isn't just to one person, but to an entire gathering of the industry's most powerful figures? Story 2. The Oscar Fire That Never Was a Count of Elena Vasquez, 39. Years old actress and Academy Award nominee. My name is Elena, and I should have won an Oscar. Not because I deserved it more than anyone else, but because I was the only nominee who knew the ceremony would never finish. I was the only one who saw the fire coming. This happened just 8 months ago, during the 96th Academy Awards ceremony. I was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for my role in Echoes of Tomorrow, my first nomination after 15 years of grinding through indie, films and television guest spots. It should have been the biggest night of my life. Instead, it became the night I learned to trust my nightmares. The dreams started 3 weeks before the ceremony. They were always the same. I'm sitting in the Dolby Theatre, wearing my burgundy Valentino gown, watching the ceremony proceed normally. But there's smoke. At first, it's just a wisp coming from somewhere behind the stage. Nobody notices it but me. In the dream, I keep trying to tell people, the actors sitting next to me, the ushers, anyone who will listen. But they're all focused on the stage, on the speeches, on the spectacle. The smoke gets thicker, and I can smell something burning, something chemical and acrid, like melting plastic mixed with electrical fire. Then the lights go out, and the screaming starts. I would wake up gasping, with the taste of smoke in my mouth, and the sound of panicked voices echoing in my ears. My therapist said it was performance anxiety, manifesting as catastrophic thinking. Classic pre-ceremony stress. She prescribed meditation and breathing exercises. But the dreams kept getting more specific. By the week of the ceremony, I could describe every detail. The smoke would start during the Best Original Screenplay presentation. It would come from the lighting rig above stage left. The fire would spread through the ceiling insulation and trigger the sprinkler system, but the electrical components would keep burning, filling the theater with toxic smoke. I knew exactly which exit routes would become blocked. I knew that the main doors would jam when everyone tried to leave at once. I knew that people would die not from the fire itself, but from smoke inhalation and the stampede toward the exits. I tried to convince myself it was just anxiety, but then I started noticing things during the rehearsals. During the technical rehearsal 2 days before the ceremony, I was watching from the wings when I smelled something burning, just for a second, exactly like in my dreams. I asked the crew about it, but nobody else had smelled anything. They checked the lighting rig anyway, and found a minor overheating issue in one of the LED panels. They fixed it and moved on, but I knew it wasn't fixed. I knew the problem was deeper than a simple panel replacement. The night before the ceremony, I called the Academy's security office. I told them I had concerns about fire safety, specifically about the lighting rig above stage left. The security coordinator was polite but dismissive. "Ma'am, we've had the fire marshal inspect every inch of this theater. Our safety systems are state-of-the-art. There's nothing to worry about. But what if there's an electrical fire during the broadcast? We have comprehensive fire suppression systems and emergency protocols. Every exit is clearly marked, and we have additional security personnel positioned throughout the theater." He was, right, of course. On paper, everything was perfect. But paper doesn't account for nightmares that feel more real than reality. The day of the ceremony, I arrived at the theater in a state of barely controlled panic. I'd barely slept, and the smell of smoke seemed to follow me everywhere. My publicist kept asking if I was feeling okay. My agent suggested I take something to calm my nerves. But I wasn't nervous about losing. I was terrified of dying. During hair and makeup, I kept checking my phone for news about fires in Los Angeles, electrical problems at other venues, anything that might explain why my subconscious was screaming warnings at me. Nothing. It was a beautiful day, clear skies, no unusual incidents anywhere in the city. As the ceremony began, I found myself studying every detail of the theater with the intensity of someone planning an escape route, which, I suppose, I was. The first 3 hours proceeded exactly as they had in my dreams. Every speech, every commercial break, every camera angle was precisely what I'd seen in my sleep. The only difference was that I was hyper-aware of every sound, every smell, every change in the air around me. Then came the Best Original Screenplay category. As the presenters took the stage, I smelled it, that chemical burning smell from my dreams. This time I didn't hesitate. I stood up and started moving toward the aisle, ignoring the confused looks from the people around me. "Elena, where—" "Are you going?" my publicist whispered. "This isn't your category. We need to leave, now." "What are you talking about?" That's when I saw the smoke. Just a wisp, exactly as I'd dreamed, coming from the lighting rig above stage left. Nobody else had noticed it yet. The presenters were still talking, the cameras were still rolling, and everything looked normal to everyone except me. I grabbed my publicist's arm. "There's going to be a fire. We need to evacuate the theater." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Elena, you're having a panic attack. Sit down and breathe." But I was already moving. I pushed past the other nominees in my row, ignoring their protests, and headed for the exit I knew would remain clear. As I reached the aisle, I turned back and shouted, "Fire! There's a fire above the stage!" For a moment, nothing happened. People turned to look at me with that mixture of confusion and embarrassment you see when someone makes a scene at a formal event. The presenters paused mid-sentence. Security started moving in my direction. Then someone else smelled the smoke. "She's right," a voice called from the balcony. "I can see flames in the ceiling." That's when everything went to hell. The organized elegance of the Academy Awards dissolved into chaos in about 10 seconds. People started standing up, looking around, pointing at the ceiling where smoke was now clearly visible. The fire alarm system activated, and the sprinklers kicked in. But instead of helping, they just created more panic as water started soaking the audience. But because I had given everyone a 30-second head start, because people were already looking for the exits when the alarm sounded, the evacuation was controlled instead of catastrophic. The ushers were able to direct people to the correct exits. Security had time to open the additional emergency doors. Nobody was trampled. The fire department arrived within minutes and contained the blaze before it could spread beyond the lighting system. The toxic smoke that would have filled the theater was vented through the roof before it reached dangerous levels. 0 casualties. A few minor injuries from people slipping on wet stairs. But nobody died. The investigation revealed exactly what I'd seen in my dreams. A cascading electrical failure in the lighting rig, caused by heat buildup from a manufacturing defect in the LED panels. The fire would have spread through the ceiling, insulation, and filled the theater with smoke within minutes. If I hadn't acted when I did, if I hadn't trusted those impossible dreams, dozens of people would have died on live television. The ceremony was postponed and held 2 weeks later at a different venue. I didn't win the Oscar. Turns out my category was scheduled for right after original screenplay, so I never got to hear my name called. But I saved my industry's biggest night from becoming its greatest tragedy. The media called me a hero. The Academy gave me a special recognition award. My agent fielded offers for a dozen movie deals based on the story. But none of that matters as much as what happened in the aftermath. People started coming forward with their own stories. A cinematographer who had dreamed about camera equipment malfunctioning before a tragic accident on set. A producer who canceled a location shoot because of a feeling that saved her crew from a mudslide. A director who changed filming locations at the last minute based on nothing but intuition, avoiding a building collapse. It turns out the entertainment industry is full of people who've learned to trust their instincts when logic fails them. We just don't talk about it because it sounds crazy, and crazy doesn't get you insured or bonded for multi-million-dollar productions. But sometimes crazy is the only thing that keeps you alive. The strangest part? I still have the dreams sometimes. Not about fires or disasters, but about good things, about perfect takes, about scenes that will work, about performances that will touch people's hearts. It's like whatever part of my brain that warned me about the fire also helps me recognize when something magical is about to happen. I've learned to trust both kinds of dreams. Have you ever had a premonition so strong it made you change your plans? Have you ever trusted a feeling that seemed impossible, only to discover later that it saved you from something terrible? Two professionals at the top of their game. Two moments when instinct overruled logic and saved lives. Danny Rodriguez trusted his gut feeling about faulty equipment and prevented a fatal stunt accident. Elena Vasquez followed her dreams of disaster and evacuated hundreds from a burning theater before anyone else knew there was danger. What strikes me most about these accounts is how both individuals initially fought against their premonitions. Both tried to rationalize away their fears, to convince themselves that their concerns were just professional anxiety or performance stress. Both were nearly dismissed by colleagues who valued schedules and logistics over intuition. But in an industry built on precise timing and calculated risks, both chose to trust something that couldn't be measured or quantified. something that saved not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. During my follow-up interviews, I discovered something remarkable. Both Danny and Elena described the same phenomenon. Their premonitions didn't just warn them of danger. They provided specific, actionable information. Danny knew exactly where the cable would fail. Elena knew precisely when and where the fire would start. It wasn't just fear, it was knowledge. This suggests that premonitions in high-stakes environments aren't random anxiety responses, but rather a form of heightened pattern recognition. Perhaps in situations where lives depend on split-second decisions, our subconscious minds become extraordinarily sensitive to subtle cues that our logical minds would dismiss. The sound of stress in a rigger's voice, the barely perceptible smell of overheating electronics, the nervous energy of crew members who sense something is wrong but can't articulate what. Both Danny and Elena had years of experience reading these subtle signs in professional settings. Perhaps their premonitions were simply this: expertise operating at a level beyond conscious awareness, their trained instincts detecting problems that hadn't yet manifested as obvious symptoms. But there's one detail that challenges this rational explanation. In both cases, the individuals experience their strongest premonitions in dreams, during sleep, when their professional training and conscious pattern recognition were offline. This suggests something deeper than professional intuition, something that operates independent of experience and training. As I was completing these interviews, I received a call from a source in the film industry. There have been 3 more incidents in recent months. A television producer who refused to use a particular location because of bad dreams, later discovering the building had structural damage that would have caused a collapse during filming. A cinematographer who insisted on changing a helicopter shot at the last minute, avoiding a mechanical failure that grounded the aircraft an hour later. A costume designer who detected a chemical reaction in fabric treatments that would have caused severe burns to actors, based purely on an inexplicable sense of wrongness. The entertainment industry, it seems, is experiencing an unusual cluster of near-miss disasters, all prevented by individuals who trusted their instincts over protocols. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these stories is how they've changed the people involved. Both Danny and Elena report that their premonitions haven't stopped. They've simply evolved. Now they dream about successes as well as disasters. They sense when a scene will work, when a performance will be magical, when a project will change careers. Their warning system has become a guidance system, helping them navigate not just danger, but opportunity. It's as if surviving one impossible premonition opens a channel to others. Have you ever had a moment when you knew something was wrong, even when everything looked perfect? Have you ever trusted a dream or a feeling that seemed irrational, only to discover it was the most rational thing you could have done?